Welcome to Soberly Speaking. I'm Julia Rangiheuia. Alice filed for bankruptcy at just 20 years of age. She was drowning in debt and stealing money from multiple jobs to fund her party lifestyle. After an abusive relationship and an unplanned pregnancy from a one-night stand, she then went on to meet her now partner, who gave her a final ultimatum. It was then that she finally began to reevaluate her drinking. Alice considers herself sober curious, admitting she's never been able to reach the 1-year sober mark. Her story is one so many people can relate to. Knowing the damage alcohol causes, but still struggling to let it go completely. Trigger warning, we discuss themes of substance abuse and domestic violence in this episode. I hope you love this chat with Alice. You are the first person who has reached out, and in your story you actually touch on finances, which was such a huge part of my journey. But let's rewind and take it back. How was drinking in your childhood?
I think I grew up in what people would say is a typical Australian household. Every celebration was surrounded with drinking. Mum and Dad always had the parties at our place. I was only talking to my sister the other day about how wild it was that everyone would just bring their kids over and we'd just be left to our own devices while everyone was drinking in the shed.
And what area of Australia were you raised?
In the east coast of Tassie.
Do you remember the first time you drank alcohol?
I don't know whether I can, there's little memories from where we would sneak behind the shed with my cousins and have a beer. And I remember lots of those, but I don't know the first time I actually had a sip. I think it was a classic, my parents thinking it was funny for us to taste a beer.
Tell me about yourself through high school, Alice.
I wasn't a big partier in high school. I went to a very small public school and I wasn't relentlessly bullied, but I just didn't fit in. Coming to find now, it's probably because I have ADHD, so that feeling of being other was always there. And then I moved to a new school in the city in grade 9 and met my friends who I'm still friends with now, and that's really when I started partying and drinking heavily. And I was always the one who just drank too much from the first time I went to a party.
And do you directly link that to your ADHD, or do you link that to the feeling of being other, or both?
I think both. If you'd asked me a year ago when I didn't have any idea what ADHD in women looked like, I would have said it's because I was trying to fit in. But then I think those two things are deeply related to each other in some way. Or maybe it's, I just wanted to be like everyone else, but I was always 2 drinks to their 1. And then because you're so little and small and you don't drink alcohol and it's in grade 9 and you're trying to be skinny and eating's cheating, it would just end up with crying and vomiting and pretending not to be hungover when your mum come to pick you up.
You don't realise how all mentally unstable we were until you say things like eating is cheating. The fact that I was saying that in year 8 is criminal.
I know.
Let's fast forward a little bit to your early 20s, Alice. What really stands out for you about your early 20s?
Drinking. Always drinking. Even from 18, I went to a Catholic school for grade 11 and 12. And obviously people are turning 18 throughout that year, and my birthday fell on a Wednesday. And the end of year was coming up, and my dad said, you can only go out drinking on your birthday if you go to school the next day. You're not, because obviously you wanted to go out and as soon as you turn 18, it's 12 p.m. and you've got your ID out in the line. I can go in now. And he said, yeah, you can do that, but you have to go to school the next day because exams were coming up. So I went out and got so drunk that I don't remember getting home, which was just a classic tale that kept happening. Um, Drove to school the next morning. If I'd been pulled over, I would have lost my license for sure. Not that I'd had drinks like that morning, but I was still just like glassy eyed, slicked back hair straight out of the shower. And that morning we got to school and had a meeting about end of year coming up and the reputation of the school and how drinking affects that. And I was curled up in a ball in the back of the meeting, hungover. And that's really what going into my 20s looked like, just always taking it too far. There was always a funny story about Alice at the party, which I think then it built a reputation that, like, oh, I'm the fun one. I have to, like, do something funny. And I would be going out with no money, no idea how I was getting home, like a $20 note, which back in the day I was getting like 5 tequila shots at the bar and I'd be set. But then just the situations I put myself in were crazy.
Were you doing drugs at this time?
Early 20s, no. I was late to the party with drugs. So I was smoking weed with my mates because that's just what everyone did, or the friends I had did anyway. But I was very oblivious to the drug scene and how many people took drugs and how accessible they were. Like when I look back now, and even when I started taking drugs, I realized everyone was always on drugs, weren't they? And I just had no idea. Even a boyfriend that I used to date who was a few years older than me, I had no idea that he took drugs until I started taking them. And I thought, oh, that's why he acted so weird all the time. He was high.
How did you meet this partner of yours and how often was he using drugs?
So the one that I had no idea was using drugs, we worked together and we actually started sleeping together when I was 16 and he was 19. Mm-hmm. And we weren't allowed to tell anyone because I was 16. And then we slept together on and off until I was 18. And then literally as soon as I turned 18, oh, it's fine now, you can be my girlfriend. So he was probably on drugs the whole time and I just would never have known. And then we did take drugs together once at the end of the relationship, but he would have been on them like every weekend. And he would always invite me over on Sundays and be so cuddly and lovey. And I just thought, oh my God, it's so nice. We hang out every Sunday and he's so nice to me. He was on a come down, probably holding on for dear life.
Did you trust him during that time? Because I think majority of people listening will know what it's like to date someone who has very addictive tendencies, that we will lie and cheat and steal and do all of the things if it means we're having a good time.
I think yes, obliviously, because I was, even though I wasn't on drugs, I was still the liar and the cheater in that relationship around alcohol. And I would, honestly, from jobs when I was 17, 18, 19, I stole money from my jobs and got fired. And I just had this like high risk tolerance. Like I didn't really care what happened. I'll get another job. Who cares? He broke up with me because I got fired from a job and he knew that the reason was because I stole money. I lost one of my best friends because her boyfriend was the manager of the store. So then he got in trouble because he hired me and I stole money. And I just didn't really care what happened, as long as I had money to go out and get drunk and have fun. And then it was just the countdown to Thursday. I was always borrowing money from like beg, borrow, steal to be able to go out drinking on the weekend. Like mum would just send me money. Like I'd say, oh, can I have $100? I'm going out with the girls. She'd be like, no, not this time. I was like, okay, well, I'm going anyway. And then she'd be worried that I wouldn't get home safely. I was never spending it on a taxi anyway, but she would send me money that I'd send back but then ask for again on 2 days later because now I didn't have money to go out because I'd sent mum the money I owed her. I was in $10,000 of debt by the time I was 20. And then so I'm trying to make the payments on like payday loans with interest rates of like 50%. Credit cards, Afterpay because I always needed a new outfit to go out. So Afterpay, Zip Pay, all the pays, all the credit I could get. And then it got to a point where no one would lend me money, like no creditors are giving me money. I can't pay I could pay the minimum payments, but that was it. I was just drowning. And so something had to change, but it still was not quitting alcohol. That wasn't the answer. Not even when because I consolidated the debt with a company, and this is another thing. I went into a Part 9 debt agreement, which is partial bankruptcy, that just goes on your credit file for 5 years. So you can't, renters know, your landlords will know about it. You have to declare it to any jobs. You can't get a car loan. You can't use any of the afterpays or borrow money from anyone. And I just was like, yeah, I'll just do that. And then I'll have a smaller payment, and then I'll be able to use the other money to go out drinking again.
Like drinking was never the issue. It's let me do all of these extravagant things, but it's not my drinking habit.
No.
What age did you get fired from the job?
The first job I got fired from, I would have been 17.
Was this for stealing?
Yep. Another one shortly after for the same. And I was then fired from another job for just being combative in the workplace. I've been fired from 5 jobs. And it was never, no one ever knew that I had a drinking problem. And even if you ask my parents or my friends, they'd never say the word alcoholic. And I had never even thought that I was an alcoholic. Even when I started to go sober, I don't think I would have used that term, but I definitely was. But my jobs were never aware of it because I think I was so focused on not being embarrassed or ashamed around my immediate friends and family that I would show up to work, because my mum and dad would have been like, why aren't you at work? So I'd show up to work. I would never, if when I got fired from my jobs, I didn't tell anyone. The only people that knew were the people that had to know. And I would just go get another job. And because you're in hospitality as well, you can just I'll take my resume into a bar. And the friend whose partner hired me, she came into a bar once and told the manager, she got fired from this place because she steals. So I got fired from there as well. Just crazy stuff that all comes back to drinking and spending money on drinking.
And Alice, I can't imagine, was it Eastern Tasmania is a big spot? I can't imagine, I would assume the rumour mill would be going crazy, no?
Well, I'm sure it was, but as I was also quite aggressive, and if someone confronted me, I'm the person that, okay, we'll have the conversation. Come with the facts. So, and I was a bit of a bitch. So I'm sure it was, but even my closest friends, a few of them approached it oh, I heard that you got fired from here. Is that true? And I'd be like, no. And they'd just be like, I'm not going to mention it. And I'm sure my parents must have questioned it at times, but even or even worse, to your immediate family, I was just so angry. It's also letting the facade down, because none of my friends or family knew about the money that I borrowed. The only person in real life that I ever borrowed money from was mum, or I would occasionally ask my little sister, but God, that's it had to be bad for me to admit to her that I needed money. And most of the time she'd say no anyway. She'd be like, no, I'm not giving you my money. So no one really knew about that side of it. But yeah, the angry, don't let it slip. No, I didn't get fired. Nothing's wrong. Go away.
Did you have any higher voice inkling that maybe it is the drinking?
I think there were points where yes, because I had relationships throughout this period. Whether they were official, Facebook relationships, or just seeing people. And I'd be going out every single weekend and they'd want to stay in, and I'd be like, boring. I'm not doing that. And then or like you end up in some random person's bed, and you'd wake up the next morning like, I genuinely don't remember what happened here.
Mm.
So yeah, there was the Sunday scaries for sure, but that was always pushed to the side, especially when the drug use started. That, well, next weekend will be more fun, so who cares what happened?
Alice, what did your life look like at this time? Obviously, you're getting fired from jobs, you've got a drinking habit, then you're being introduced to drugs. I just want to get a real vision of the Alice who was able to hide this for so long.
I had a really good job where I earned a lot of money, and I still don't, like, can't tell you where that went. Like, I was earning almost more than I do now because I was working casually in a government agency. I was living out of home with my partner. We had lots of friends because we were the party house. We'd go out every weekend and take caps and whatever we could get our hands on and just have a good time. My school friends have always been so, so, so loyal to me, thank God. I've got two friends from school who have just stuck by me through it all, and they've never had an intervention with me. They do go dark a bit when I've probably wrecked a birthday or two, but so they've always been close. And my little sister and her friends, we always got along because it was always so fun to hang out with Alice as well. I just think because the like few times that it was a meltdown or I was crying, you could just write it off because, yeah, she did have a lot to drink.
Is the partner you're talking about now, is that the father of your child?
No, the partner that introduced the drugs and partying ended in a very tumultuous breakup, which police were involved and cars were trashed, and there was definitely domestic violence. There was, I would say, coercive control, emotional abuse, which led to physical abuse. And as a survivor of that, I would say that I didn't ever de escalate a situation. I would never step down. Like, if he did something that he knew would trigger me, I'd be like, okay, let's go then. So I would say it was a tumultuous, abusive relationship from both parties. There was a time I ended up in plaster because one thing led to another and he pushed me, so I punched him. And then I had to walk around with my arm in a cast with people asking, oh my God, are you okay? What happened? Yes, I'm fine. I punched a wall. Like, just stuff like that happening. And that's where the cracks started to show for sure. And then we went into the pandemic and being locked in a house with someone like that. And he didn't have to work because he was a chef. So we were stuck in a house together. And that's really where I sort of, maybe the ball dropped there, that this isn't what I want. I don't want to. We couldn't go out partying. So that vice was gone. We weren't really drinking, and my life was just lots of fights, boring, and I just didn't really want to live in a situation where I felt like that.
Did your drinking and drug taking ramp up during COVID when you were locked down with him?
No, not really. It ramped up again as soon as it was over, as soon as I could get back out the door. And I think a lot of it was socializing for me as well. As soon as I could get back out the door and socialize, I met one of my really good friends who's my best friend now, and we went back into a deep, deep, deep party phase, which is where the drugs really came into it. And I think, yeah, after that relationship, you're going through a breakup, you've been introduced. We could get drugs so much easier when I was friends with her for some reason. um, yeah, and then all of that was happening. And then I think the thing that really shook me was when I had an unexpected pregnancy with someone I took home from partying.
So it was a one night stand baby. Is that correct?
Yeah, we knew each other. Like, we weren't strangers to each other. We played football at the same football club. And yeah, we just went home one night. I can't really remember the night, but I knew I was ovulating that night. And I said to myself, because I tracked it very like well on my Flow app, and I said, don't go home with anyone tonight. Like, tonight is not the night, girl. And then one thing led to another. And I feel like I knew straight away, like, you fucked up real bad. And then I just didn't want to face what had happened. So it took me a while. Like, I knew my period had been late for like a week. And then I took the test, and it was, and like, even with my baby that is born now, I've never seen a darker test than the one I took with the baby that was not supposed to happen.
How do you break the news to someone who is on your football team that you guys are going to have a baby together?
Well, classic me. I wasn't telling anyone. Nothing was happening. I was fine. I went straight back out drinking. No, I didn't tell him. He actually found out from football club gossip and had to ask me. And he was like, what's going on? I would have come to the appointments with you to, like, obviously we didn't want to have the baby together. It was mutual that we were going to get a termination, but he was like, I would have come to the appointments and like helped you pay. Why didn't you say anything? And I just was like, because I didn't want to talk about it. Leave me alone. Mistakes in the past. Bye.
Alice, does this scare you at all to maybe slow down the drinking and the drug taking?
In hindsight, yes, I think I was terrified. But again, I wanted to pretend everything was fine. Everyone eventually found out what was happening. And I didn't want to like disappear off the face of the earth. I wanted to keep up appearances, but then it turned into like meltdowns every time I was drunk, like crying and crying because life was not lifing. And then I booked a one-way ticket to Brisbane to run away from what was going on. So it's basically the termination, and then I booked a ticket. It was Christmas and New Year's, and then by March, I'd found myself a new job, a place to live with a stranger off flatmates, and I was gone. For the first few months, it was rinse and repeat, like taking more drugs than I'd ever taken. But then I met my partner, a random boy on Tinder who I was just being my usual, like, manic self, don't care about the risk, like, oh yeah, I'll go over to his house. Like, I'm new to Brisbane, I don't know where anything is. He paid for me to go in an Uber to his house. And cheesily enough, it was love at first sight, but he hated girls who took drugs. He's really anti-drugs, like, in general. He's been through the ringer with drugs himself, and he just knew that he was looking for a life partner and someone to have children with, and he didn't want that person to take drugs or go out drinking every weekend. So if I wanted to hang out with him, I had to make a decision. Even saying that, though, there were still times where I would go out and relapse, I suppose, but I'd never actually said I'm going sober. But there were times I would like go out and say, yeah, I'm just going out with the footy girls and we're just going to have one drink, or I won't drink, and I'd come home high.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't everything stopping at once, but it was definitely the catalyst of, this is the life I want. I've got to change.
I do want to go back to your pregnancy with your child that you have now. Talk me through being pregnant with a baby and having those addictive tendencies towards alcohol.
I want to be the person that says it was so easy for me. Like, I knew that it was the baby's health, but I couldn't even give up drinking for 9 months. I had a drink on my birthday. Oh, one cocktail won't hurt. I was pregnant over New Year's, so I had one drink at dinner with that. And thankfully it didn't affect my baby at all. But isn't that so sad? Like, I was selfish so selfish that the person that I know now, who's 2.5 years old, I couldn't even put
Mm.
him first for New Year's Eve or my birthday. I'm currently only 28 and my baby's 2.5. So you may have cottoned on that we had got pregnant pretty quickly, but we decided we were the one for each other and I was quitting partying and we were going to have a baby. And we started trying 12 weeks after we met each other. So I don't know if that's my addictive, crazy, manic, high risk personality or love at first sight. You can take out of that what you will. But then we got pregnant first try. So we'd literally known each other for 3 months and we were pregnant. And we'd signed a lease to a house together and I'd given up drinking.
Mm. There's so many layers to this, Alice, because one, you started drinking so young, and that's when you were really molding your identity and you latched onto the party girl identity. And two, you started drinking because you felt other. And for me, what I'm hearing about your story about becoming a young mum so fast, you were given an ultimatum, it almost feels like it would resurface, I assume, those 2 points of feeling other and what is my identity. How was it when you actually had baby?
My partner started working in the mines when he was born. So he was 6 weeks old, and I was left at home with the 6 week old alone. With these, I had lots of postpartum anxiety and postpartum rage, and I would get to sleep at night by having a drink. It wasn't like getting wasted where I couldn't look after my child or I was going out and leaving the house, but it was still going back to that old comfort of, oh, I'll just have two ciders and then I'll be able to fall asleep and I'll feel good. And then getting up slightly hungover the next day because I hadn't drank for 9 months. But the one thing that did deter me a bit was alcohol made me feel awful after. It's like my body detoxed and didn't want it back. I would get so, so sick. Like I'd have one drink and feel like I was going to vomit. So that was a blessing in disguise, I guess.
How is your relationship with money now, Alice?
Much better. I still, honestly, I think it's been combining the money that has made me realize like you need to pull this in and sort this out. When we had a baby, it became obvious to me that I needed to sort my shit out because now someone truly relied on me. And like, I don't want to be asking my mum for money to buy groceries for my child. I think sadly it still comes back to that shame and guilt that kicked my ass into gear, but a positive came out of it. In saying that, we have a blended money situation where everything goes into the same bank account and we'll set aside money back into our own personal bank accounts that only we have access to for spending money. I don't have any of that left after a few days though. I'm still
Mm.
so impulsive with the money that I know only impacts me. So it's still a work in progress, I think.
Your sober journey now, or your sober curious, what does that look like? Does that look like one drink a week? Does that look like for special occasions? How does that play out in your life?
Honestly, I could go like the last drink I had was last night. I went to the movies with my sister in law and we were having a super fun night. And she wanted to get a margarita, so I thought, well, I'll just get one too. And it tasted lovely, but I still wanted to go out and get drunk afterwards. But prior to that, the gap had been like 3 months. And then prior to that, it was 6 months. And then prior to that, it had been a year. And I think it's just the situations where people would normally drink and they would be okay. I still want to be a part of that. And I think I'm still learning that there are people like me who just can't drink and that's okay. And I think in my family and the child I'm raising, I don't want I want alcohol to have sort of a neutral presence. I don't want it to be this thing that you have to have or you're pressured to have or everyone does it. It's just like Want a can of Coke? No, thanks, I'm fine. Beer? No. Like that same just neutral presence rather than it being a must that you have to like make a big decision and it's on everyone's minds when you don't drink. Because now I'm pregnant every time I say no to a drink.
I'm so curious to know, how do you change for people listening out there who they're exactly like Alice, they think they're sober curious, they might have a drink here or there. What is that thought that actually stops you from getting the bottle, that stops you from buying a bag, that stops you from pushing the boat out every time?
I think if it's not shame that's stopping you, you need to think of your future self, especially if you have children or a partner. If you decide to be childless or you can't have babies for some reason, they might not voice it, but I'm thinking, what are they thinking of me? Is this something that when I'm in a really good mood and I've eaten my 3 meals a day and had my medication and I'm feeling great, that person, my higher self, if you will, she doesn't want us to do this. And I think if you stop giving in to the demons, they do get quieter eventually. The first year of sobriety, honestly, is the hardest. And I've never got to a full year yet. So that goes to show exactly how hard it is. But I don't know. I've listened to a few of your episodes, and I think with people specifically on alcohol, while the voice is always there, I think you'll keep thinking of reasons and they'll keep stacking up, and there'll be more and more the longer you stay sober to keep doing it.
Alice, I can't wait for you to hit that year, and that decision will always be here whenever you're ready, whether that be tomorrow or in 6 months or a year. Sobriety will always be there, waiting whenever you are. Thank you so much for coming on Soberly Speaking.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much for listening to Soberly Speaking. We are now dropping episodes every Mondays and Thursdays. You can catch the Monday interviews, the full episodes on YouTube at Soberly Speaking. We are also on TikTok, on Instagram. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, hit that follow button to stay up to date with all the latest episodes. All my love.